The Big Red Machine. Sounds like something out of an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, right? Well, surprise, surprise, this Big Red Machine actually refers to the Cincinnati Reds. Well, some folks nod and say it all kicked off in 1970 when the Reds brought in the former minor league maestro, George Sparky Anderson. But hold on a sec, because if you peek back to the early 60s, you'll catch wind of some game-changing moments that laid the groundwork for this powerhouse team. It's like a time-traveling tale where the roots of greatness were planted before the Big Red Machine kicked into high gear, and we're about to help you make that journey. The Cincinnati Reds were riding high after snagging the National League pennant in '39 and sealing the World Series deal in '40. But fast forward to '45 and things took a nosedive. The Reds were stuck in a rut, barely keeping their heads above water with just 2 winning seasons from '45 to '60. But in '61, the comeback began. Led by the MVP powerhouse Frank Robinson, the Reds snatched their 4th National League pennant. The '60s saw them capturing the winning vibe again, with just a tiny blip in '66, and bam, they were back in the World Series spotlight in 1970. The '70s baseball royalty, Yankees, A's, and the Orioles were the big names ruling the diamond at that time. But guess who was gearing up to steal the show? You got it, the Reds were ready to shake things up and give those legends a run for their money. When Sparky Anderson took the reins, he had a lineup that sent shivers down opponents' spines. The catching sensation Johnny Bench, outfielder Pete Rose, and the dynamic duo of infielders Dave Concepcion and Tony Perez. Plus, they had arms like Jim Merritt and Gary Nolan holding it down on the mound. Obviously, we're looking at a dream team. But wait a moment, how did we arrive here? Well, it actually started from the top. In 1961, the Cincinnati Reds faced a change in ownership as Powell Crosley, who was the team's longtime owner, passed away. Despite missing the World Series that year, the team continued to shine under the new ownership of Bill DeWitt. This Reds team, propelled by a stellar farm system, remained competitive throughout the decade, showcasing the talents of future Big Red Machine stars like Johnny Bench, Tony Perez, Pete Rose, and Dave Concepcion. However, it was in 1967 that the winning momentum received a boost with the appointment of Bob Hausman as the general manager, who brought valuable experience from guiding the St. Louis Cardinals. Additionally, the prospect of a new stadium on the city's riverfront set the stage for a transformative era. At that time, Crosley Field, which was the team's longtime home, faced challenges including limited parking and outdated facilities. Threats of relocation to New York in the late 50s were temporarily quelled, but the need for a modern stadium persisted. So it's only natural that the turning point came with the proposed construction of a multi-purpose stadium on the riverfront, providing a solution to the Reds' facility woes. Also, the intersection of baseball and professional football came into play in this story when Paul Brown, seeking a return to the football scene after being ousted from the Cleveland Browns, collaborated with then Ohio Governor James Rhodes to establish a new franchise in Cincinnati. The city's bid for an AFL franchise was dependent on the construction of a new stadium, which would serve as the home for both the Reds and the new football team. This stadium wasn't just a venue, it was the linchpin for Cincinnati's entry into the AFL-NFL merger. Without this pivotal development, the city wouldn't have secured a franchise in the newly merged league. So they ditched the old Crosley Field for the shiny new Riverfront Stadium. And fresh digs, fresh vibes. In 1970, the Reds weren't just winning, they were dominating. A whopping 102 wins, clinching the division 14.5 games ahead of the LA Dodgers. And when they faced off against the Pirates in the playoffs, it was a cakewalk. A sweet sweep, holding Pittsburgh to just 3 measly runs. The World Series would soon come around, and while they lost to the Orioles, you could practically hear the rumbles of a comeback echoing. Surprisingly, the 1971 season didn't turn out as most people had expected. In fact, the year ended in a shocking 79-83 record that left most fans scratching their heads. Thankfully, the '72 season brought a redemption arc with a stellar 95-59 record. Bench snagged another MVP and a nail-biting NLCS win against the Pirates. You could smell it in the air, the Reds were back. Yet deja vu struck in the World Series, as it ended in a heartbreak against the Oakland A's after 7 games. Well, that didn't dampen the high spirits, and the machine kept grinding in '73 with a 99-63 record, division champs, and Rose adding an MVP to the trophy shelf. But then the New York Mets crashed the postseason party in the NLCS. Fast forward to '74, and the Reds were on fire with a 98-64 record. Yet the Dodgers played spoiler, snagging the division by a hair's breadth. No doubt, this was a frustrating end to an otherwise stellar season, but even this couldn't diminish the spirit of the Big Red Machine. The Cincinnati Reds entered a golden era, achieving a remarkable 108-54 record in 1975 and sweeping the Pirates in the NLCS. Plus, in an epic World Series against the Red Sox, the Reds emerged victorious in 7 thrilling games, and there were more accolades to come. Sparky Anderson earned the title of NL Manager of the Year, while second baseman Joe Morgan claimed the NL MVP award. That year, the team boasted an impressive lineup with Morgan, Concepcion, Perez, Rose, and Bench all earning spots on the NL All-Star team. It was a total domination. Of course, the dominance of this 1975 team drew comparisons to the 1927 New York Yankees, known for winning 114 games and sweeping the Pirates in the World Series, but it didn't end there for the Reds. The momentum carried into 1976, where they secured another 100-plus win season, finishing with a 102-60 record. Plus, this year, Joe Morgan clinched his second consecutive MVP award, marking the 5th time in 7 years that a Reds player claimed the coveted title. The 1976 roster showcased an all-star lineup with Morgan, Bench, Rose, Perez, Concepcion, Ken Griffey Sr., and 1977 NL MVP George Foster. Of course, the Reds maintained their supremacy in the league this year, sweeping both the Philadelphia Phillies in the NLCS and the Yankees in the World Series. At this point, almost all doubts were being cleared, and it was becoming obvious that the 1975-1976 Reds stood as one of the greatest teams in Major League history. The team continued its success from 1977 to 1981, securing at least 88 wins each year. However, the tide turned in 1982 when the Reds experienced a downturn, losing 101 games. And despite a subsequent World Series appearance and victory in 1990 against the heavily favored Oakland A's, the glory years of 1970 to 1976 remained unmatched. Now, to give you a better perspective, let's take a deeper dive into the success of these years. Everyone knows the Great Eight of the Red Machine, but 3 players were far more outstanding than the others. Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, and Joe Morgan were unstoppable for the Cincinnati Reds. In 1963, Rose seized his opportunity when regular second baseman Don Blasingame was sidelined with a pulled groin muscle, and very soon, his tenacity on the field earned him the nickname Charlie Hustle. Surprisingly, this name actually came from opposing player Whitey Ford during a spring training game against the New York Yankees. But then, despite the intended derision, Rose embraced the moniker and would go on to totally embody it. Ending the season with a .273 average, Rose claimed the National League Rookie of the Year award. Plus, in a memorable game against the Houston Colt 45s in 1964, this tenacious player's hustle on the base path led to a victory, and he finished the year with a .269 average. The 1968 season showcased Rose's resilience, featuring a 22-game hitting streak, a comeback from a broken thumb, and a late-season 19-game hitting streak. That year, he secured the NL batting title with a .335 average, narrowly defeating Matty Alou. Plus, despite finishing second to Bob Gibson for the NL MVP award, Rose earned 6 first-place votes that year. And now, to his most memorable moment, which was the 1970 All-Star Game at the newly opened Riverfront Stadium that became infamous for Rose's collision with Ray Fosse. In the 12th inning, Rose's aggressive play secured the winning run for his team, but left Fosse with a fractured and separated shoulder. Of course, the incident became one of the most controversial moments in Reds history, but then it also showcased Rose's relentless style of play and how tenacious he was whenever he stepped onto the diamond. As for Johnny Bench, he made his debut with the Reds in August 1967, hitting .163 but leaving a lasting impression with his stellar defense and strong throwing arm. By the end of that season, this prospective star player was already earning praise from the legendary Ted Williams. His raw talent was so impressive that Williams even predicted Bench's future induction into the Hall of Fame. Williams hit the bullseye with that prediction because the prophecy would later come to fulfillment in 1989 when Bench was enshrined in Cooperstown. In his first full season in 1968, the 20-year-old Bench showcased his talents, winning the National League Rookie of the Year award. That season, he batted .275 with 15 home runs and 82 RBIs, making history as the first catcher to ever receive the prestigious award. However, the electrifying player's pinnacle came in 1970 at the age of 22. No doubt, this was a season marked by extraordinary achievements, and he ended it by becoming the youngest player to claim the National League Most Valuable Player award. Batting .293, Bench led the National League with 45 home runs and set a franchise record with 148 RBIs, all combining to propel the Reds to victory in the NL West Division. And now to the last of the dominant trio, Joe Morgan, who found himself traded to the Cincinnati Reds in a blockbuster deal on November 29, 1971. Prior to this trade, Morgan had been playing with distinction for the Houston Astros. Plus, despite initial skepticism about the trade, it proved to be a game-changer for the Cincinnati Reds. Morgan, along with Pete Rose, became a catalyst at the top of the Reds lineup, adding home run power, speed, and excellent defense to the already formidable team. As a key part of the Big Red Machine, Morgan made 8 consecutive All-Star Game appearances from 1972 to 1979, complementing his earlier appearances in 1966 and 1970 with the Astros. Also, alongside teammates Rose, Bench, Perez, and Concepcion, Morgan played a pivotal role in leading the Reds to consecutive World Series championships. And to crown it all, this legend drove in the winning run in Game 7 of the 1975 World Series, securing a memorable victory for the Big Reds. Indeed, his outstanding contributions earned him the National League MVP title in both 1975 and 1976, making him the first ever second baseman in NL history to achieve the back-to-back feat. And that doesn't even paint the full picture of Morgan's achievements, because during his MVP years, he boasted so many impressive stats, including a .324 batting average, 44 home runs, 205 RBIs, 246 walks, and 127 stolen bases. Of course, if there's a special season to be remembered in the history of the Big Red Machine, it has to be the 1975 season. This season stands as a legendary chapter in American baseball history, and the Reds were at the forefront of it. Dominating the league with a remarkable record of 108-54, the team secured the National League West title, finishing a staggering 20 games ahead of the Los Angeles Dodgers. But that's not even half of the story yet. Under the leadership of manager Sparky Anderson, the Reds continued their triumphant journey by sweeping the Pittsburgh Pirates in the NLCS and ultimately winning the World Series in a 7-game showdown against the Boston Red Sox. Playing their home games at Riverfront Stadium that year, the 1975 Reds marked a historic achievement for Cincinnati by securing their first World Series championship since 1940. Plus, renowned for their exceptional performance, the team was often mentioned in the same breath as the 1927 New York Yankees, with both franchises contending for the title of the best team in Major League history. No doubt, a standout feature of the Reds' dominance during their prime was their unparalleled home record, finishing 64-17 in 1975, a record that remains the best home record ever by a National League team even to this day. Notably, the 1975 Reds clinched a playoff appearance on September 7th, achieving the earliest clinch date in any MLB team's history during a 162-game season. And adding to the team's legacy, Joe Morgan was named the National League's most valuable player in 1975, contributing significantly to the Reds' historic season. When we mention the Big Red Machine, the image that comes to mind is offensive firepower, stellar pitching, and defensive excellence. Their lineup, which is often considered one of the greatest in MLB history, boasted power, speed, and consistency. Moreover, these Reds showcased remarkable team chemistry, exemplified by their ability to win games both at home and on the road. The Big Red Machine redefined the standard for excellence in baseball, influencing the way the game was played and setting records that are still revered today. No doubt, they deserve every single accolade they are getting.